Okay, think about some of the sounds, this really iconic sounds in music. What pops into your head first? Maybe it's a big, flashy guitar solo, right? Or a bass line you feel in your chest. Maybe a synth hook you can't forget. But what about the gear that's working more subtly, kind of behind the scenes, the unsung heroes, that quietly shape whole genres without really shouting about it, but they're absolutely crucial to the sound you love? Well, today we're going to get into one of those understated legends, the Boss PH1 phaser. We're doing a deep dive into its beginnings, trying to unravel what made it sound unique and uncovering the impact it had, which is surprisingly big. Our mission really is to figure out how this little yellow box, often kind of overshadowed by the louder pedals, how it became such a cornerstone for Boss and earned this title of a quiet classic.
Hmm.
We've been digging into an exhaustive history of this pedal, and honestly, there's some fascinating stuff in there I'm excited to unpack with you because, you hear phaser and you might think, like huge dramatic swooshes. But the PH1, it tells a different story, a really musical one. All right, so to really get the PH1, we have to go back to 1977, which was a pretty big year, not just for music generally, but definitely for Boss. Because this wasn't just, another pedal hitting the market.
No, it was way more than that. It was like the start of a whole new thing for them.
Exactly. The PH1 phaser arrives, and it's one of the very first compact modulation pedals in what becomes that classic Boss Stomp Box series. It was actually part of Boss's first batch of 4 compact pedals. You had the OD1 Overdrive,
The yellow one, legendary.
the SP1 Spectrum, which is kind of unusual,
Yeah, the red one, tone shaper.
and the CS1 Compressor Sustainer, the blue one.
Right. So the PH1 was the green one in that initial quartet.
And that group, that set of 4, wasn't just about the sounds. It established the look, that tough little box shape that, amazingly, they still use today.
It's incredible, isn't it? That form factor just stuck.
So yeah, this wasn't just a pedal. It was like one of the founding members of the whole Boss compact pedal empire. That familiar look started right there.
Absolutely. And, what's really interesting to me is how subtle it was. That wasn't a flaw. It was baked into the design. The whole idea was to give guitarists a smooth, 4-stage analog phasing effect. Now, stages, what does that mean? Basically, think of your sound going through these little frequency filters, one after another. 4 stages, like the PH1 had, generally gives you a gentler sweep, less intense.
So not as like deep and wobbly as some others.
Exactly. It's different from, say, an 8 or 12 stage phaser where you can get these really dramatic peaks and valleys in the sound, almost vocal-like sometimes. The PH1 was aiming to give players those swirling psychedelic sounds from the late 60s, early 70s.
Really, that classic phase sound?
Yeah, but in a small, tough box you could actually take on the road.
Right.
Reliable, easy. And it makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How often do we kind of ignore the effects that just enhance things subtly instead of the ones that completely change the sound?
That's a great question. And it does make me wonder, especially now with all these complex digital pedals that can do almost anything, is there a danger that maybe newer players might just miss the beauty of something like the PH1? Because it doesn't totally transform your tone, it doesn't stream effect.
Oh, I think that's a definite risk. Yeah, we're kind of drawn to the dramatic, aren't we? But the PH1's brilliance was in its subtlety. People describe the sound as, like, velvety or liquid, a delicate musical sweep.
Liquid, I like that.
Yeah, it's like a soft, gentle movement in the sound. It was way less dramatic than its famous rivals back then.
Yeah.
The MXR Phase 90 could be quite raw.
Oh, yeah, very distinct.
And the Electro-Harmonic Smilestone had that big whoosh. The PH1 wasn't really chewy or super resonant like some later phasers, even later Boss ones. But again, that wasn't a weakness. That was its unique selling point.
Okay, I see that. But comparing it to those really characterful phasers, wasn't there a risk it might sound a bit plain or
Ugh.
polite? Did people think Boss was maybe playing it a little too safe? Or was that quietness always the strategy, aiming for a different kind of player?
I think it was absolutely the strategy. Boss was building its reputation on pedals that were, number one, reliable, but also easy to use and fundamentally musical.
Right.
That understated nature made it incredibly useful. It worked so well for, say, funk rhythm guitar, just adding that little bit of shimmer to clean chords.
Without getting in the way.
Exactly. Without grounding the guitar, perfect for session work back then. Or for psychedelic stuff, it could add depth without making everything sound muddy. It's like, the right amount of seasoning, not the whole meal. It enhanced your core tone instead of covering it up.
That makes a lot of sense. And the tech behind it, the electronics, were pretty smart for the time to achieve that smoothness, right? It wasn't just luck.
Not at all. Pure engineering. So like we said, it's a four-stage phaser that's built on these things called all-pass filters. And those filters are modulated, meaning their frequency is swept up and down, by an internal LFO, a low-frequency oscillator.
Okay, the LFO creates the sweep.
Yep, that's the engine making the whoosh happen, slow or fast. And crucially, the PH1 used OTA's operational transconductance amplifiers.
OTAs, what did they do?
Well, without getting too technical, think of an OTA as a really precise way to control current with voltage. For the PH1, it meant the phasing effect could sweep really smoothly and cleanly. You didn't get the sort of grit or maybe instability that some other designs could have. It was all about achieving that smooth musical character.
And yet, on the outside, classic Boss simplicity. Just two knobs.
That's simple.
You had rate that controlled how fast the sweep was, from really slow, drifty sounds to a faster kind of warble. And then depth, which was just how intense the effect was, how deep the phase sound went.
Right. Super easy to dial in something good quickly. No instruction manual needed, really. Just very Boss.
Totally. And it also had the standard Boss switching system, the FET switching, for bypass.
Yeah, FET stands for Field Effect Transistor, and that switching was a big deal because it was quiet. You didn't get that loud pop when you kicked the pedal on or off, which was a problem with a lot of true bypass pedals back then.
Okay. So it was a buffered bypass system.
Exactly. And a little detail for the vintage gearheads, the power requirement. Early Boss pedals like the PH1 often needed a 12-volt ACA adapter.
Oh, right. Not the standard 9-volt we use now.
Not initially, no. You could use a 9-volt battery, but for adapter power, it was ACA 12-volt back then. They switched to the PSA 9-volt standard later. Just shows how things evolved.
Okay, so the original PH1 runs from 77 to about 81, sets the stage. You can spot those early ones made in Japan, sometimes a silver screw holding the foot switch, maybe a black label underneath.
Real collector's items now.
Definitely. But Boss being Boss, they didn't just stop there. They listened to players.
Right.
And evolved the idea.
They did. The market was changing. Maybe players wanted a little more intensity sometimes. So the next big step was the PH1R. That came out in 1980 and ran until 85.
The R. What did the R stand for?
Resonance. And that was the key addition. They added a third knob.
Okay.
This resonance control boosted the feedback inside the phaser circuit, which basically made the phasing sound more pronounced, more intense, even a bit more aggressive if you cranked it.
So the PH1R was basically the original PH1 circuit, but with this extra control for more flexibility.
Pretty much, yeah. It gave it a bit more bite, let it compete more directly with those MXR electro-harmonic sounds that were often a bit more in your face.
Yeah.
It was Boss responding to what musicians were asking for.
That's such a key part of their story, isn't it? That constant refinement. And you can really see how that philosophy paved the way for later Boss phasers.
Totally. It set the pattern.
Like the PH2 came out in 1984, and that one really upped the ante, right? It had more stages, including a 12-stage mode for really extreme sounds.
Yeah, much deeper, more vocal-like phasing possible with the PH2.
And then much later, in 2000, the PH3 arrives. Fully digital, tap tempo, step phasing, all sorts of modern stuff.
A completely different beast, but you can still trace the lineage back.
So you see this clear line. Start with a great, simple idea, then build on it, add features, adapt to new tech.
And if you zoom out, you see Boss doing this across their product lines. Start solid, then iterate. Add versatility. It really shows they understood what players needed over time. It's like a masterclass in developing a product family, you know? From that simple analog core to digital complexity, but always with that Boss reliability factor.
Let's talk about who was actually using the PH1 back then. You said it wasn't always the pedal with the big rock star names attached.
Right. It didn't quite have the same high-profile endorsements as maybe the Phase 90 did with Van Halen or the Small Stone with, well, lots of people.
But it found its niche.
Absolutely. It was super popular in the late 70s, early 80s, especially in funk, new wave, and some of that early post-punk stuff. You'd hear it adding that subtle shimmer to clean funk guitar rhythms.
Yeah.
Just enough movement.
I can picture that.
Or giving some atmospheric swirl to those sparser new wave arrangements. Maybe adding texture for bands like The Cure or Susie and the Banshees in their early days. It wasn't always obvious, but it was there.
And that goes back to the quiet classic idea. Its strength was maybe because it wasn't always front and center.
Exactly. And this is where the Boss reputation for just being rock solid reliable really paid off.
Yeah.
Gigging musicians, studio players, people who needed gear that just worked night after night, session after session, they relied on Boss. So the PH1 became a staple for working musicians. It earned its stripes through consistent performance, not just hype.
That's really interesting. It kind of flips the script on what makes gear influential, doesn't it? Are you sort of saying that just being reliable and useful for everyday players can actually create a stronger legacy than flashy ads or big names using it? It feels a bit counterintuitive today.
I think it really does. It makes you ask, does a pedal need huge marketing or a famous user to be truly important? The PH1 suggests maybe not. That consistent quality, that reliability that working musicians depend on, that builds a really deep, powerful legacy. That's maybe the most authentic kind of influence,
Yeah.
when it becomes part of the essential toolkit for the people actually making music day in, day out.
And that legacy, that respect, translates into collectability now, right?
Oh, for sure. Original PH1s are definitely sought after. They weren't made for that long, only about 4 years.
So they're quite rare.
Yeah, finding one in good shape, especially an early Japanese one with the black label maybe, that's a find for Boss collectors.
And the PH1R.
That one's a bit easier to find, had a slightly longer run, and interestingly, a lot of players and collectors actually prefer the PH1R because of that added resonance knob.
Gives it more sonic options.
Exactly, more versatility while keeping that core smooth sound. So yeah, both are definitely collectible now. They represent that foundational era for Boss. But beyond just collecting, the real legacy is how it kicked off Boss's whole phaser journey. It paved the way for the PH2, the PH3 pedals that are still staples for guitarists today. It all started there.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. The Boss PH1 Phaser comes out in '77. Not just their first modulation pedal, but one of the original four that launched the whole compact stopbox phenomenon for Boss.
Define the look, the reliability.
Right. And its sound. Smooth, subtle, four-stage, analog phasing. Not dramatic, but really musical and versatile. Became a bit of a secret weapon, a quiet classic, in funk, new wave, post-punk.
A real workhorse pedal.
And even though maybe overshadowed sometimes, its evolution into the PH1R and its influence on later Boss phasers cements its importance. It's the beginning of a long line of innovation. You know, the story of the PH1 really makes you think about what innovation actually means in music gear. It reminds us that huge impact doesn't always come from the loudest, most complicated headline-grabbing effect. Sometimes it's the quiet enablers. The tools that are so reliable, so well designed for their subtle job that they almost disappear into the music.
They just become part of the sound.
Exactly. They become this invisible foundation that lets countless musicians build their own sounds. It wasn't trying to be the sound, it was helping create the sound. So maybe the final thought for you listening is this. How many other invisible legends are hiding in plain sight in the music you love? Maybe listen again to some favorite tracks. Try and hear those subtle layers, those quiet classics that might be shaping things more than you realize. It might just inspire you to explore sound in a new way. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.